Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week 5 edition of NFL Soundbites. I'm Tom Moore, and as always, I'm joined by former 8-year NFL linebacker and now game day color analyst for the Minnesota Vikings, Pete Bercich. Now, Pete, I got to start out this week by reminding you of a comment you made during your radio broadcast last week when the Giants visited the Vikings on Monday night. And what you said was, as linebacker Eric Kendricks dropped a sure interception that would have sealed the game a little bit earlier for the Vikings, you said, if that had been a spear, it would have killed it. now, here's what I got to ask you. Kendricks was a college running back at UCLA, so he should have known how to catch the ball. From your perspective as a player, as a coach, why is it so hard for linebackers and defensive backs to hold on to sure interceptions? And when you played, did you have any sure interceptions you dropped?
Yeah, I did actually. I had one. I had one in college that would have really changed my senior season against Boston College. I mean, that's a drop pick that I had that still haunts me to this day. So yeah, and then I had another one that from John Elway that I could have had, but I missed it. That was a little tougher when it was thrown behind me. But you know, the difference is when you go to a practice throughout the week. Fullbacks, receivers, all those guys. I bet they go to the machine. They catch hundreds of footballs every single week. And then when you play defense, you may get some throws to you from a linebacker coach in warmups, and that's about it. So it's a skill, but it's like anything else. If you don't work on it, and these guys that are on offense, they work on it. And you can tell, you can see it in the games and the offenses. It's just, guys don't drop a lot of footballs, but they practice it. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of receptions every single week. And then when you flip over to the defensive side, like I said, you catch maybe 10, 15 footballs a week, and that over time adds up. So, normally DBs are receivers that can't catch. You know what I mean? Everybody wants to be a wide receiver. That's kind of the rule of thumb, and it's kind of the same thing for linebackers. I mean, the good ones usually played running back in high school or tight end, and then you just kind of get away from catching the football every day, and that's what happens. So it's understandable. I mean, you can't. How do I say it? I mean, to say you're a great linebacker who can't catch. I mean, I don't know if that's a shot. I mean, that might be. That's just.
Well, I know in high school you played tight end, so apparently you couldn't catch. You became a linebacker.
No, but the thing today is with the gloves that these guys wear and the technology. Don't think for 1 minute that technology hasn't changed the receiving game. I mean, these gloves that they wear now. I mean, the ones that we wore back in the day were actual leather, so you get wet and they get sweaty and slippery. And nowadays, with the tactileness that they put on them. I mean, it's amazingly easy to catch a football with those gloves. I mean, it's crazy. So that helps quite a bit. The gloves nowadays, if you went in my day, this is a question we'll ask Chris Carter when we have him on. How many more footballs he would have caught if he could have worn the gloves that they wear today? I mean, it is that big of a difference. It's a whole order of magnitude better for these guys these days with these gloves that they wear. You watch pregame now, and pregame is now, all of a sudden a chance for guys to show off their skills. I mean, you look at the stuff that Cam Newton does in pregame that makes it on the pregame shows. And before our game, Odell Beckham was trying to catch punts one-handed, that kind of garbage. I mean, they do that stuff, but they can do that stuff not because they're just elite players. They do it because of these gloves that they have.
With gloves or not, I know this last week the Viking running game got a little bit back on track again with Jerick McKinnon. And from your perspective, what you saw at the stadium, was it McKinnon's patience for a hold open or maybe an improvement in the offensive line blocking, or maybe it's better situational play calling by Norv Turner? What yielded that better success in the run game?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, you have two different running backs with McKinnon and Asiata. Asiata is just a north-south kind of guy. So you're going to want to have certain plays and certain blocking schemes when he's in there. And then McKinnon, he has some vision. And I'll say this: if there's a couple of guys that I think showed up more, one of them is McKinnon. McKinnon looks better. He was injured before the season started, and he just didn't have that juice and that explosiveness that he had in the past. That started to come back against the Giants, so I think he's feeling better. The same thing goes for Charles Johnson. I mean, he couldn't get any separation at all in a Tennessee game from any of the DBs. but he started to show that a little bit against the Giants. So those two guys, I think, are getting healthy again, and they're key now. They're huge to this offense because we're going to be throwing the ball more. The running game just needs to be efficient. You just have to run it well enough to get the teams to respect the play action. And once the play action opens up, we've seen Bradford. Bradford's one of the better play action quarterbacks I've seen. And once we get that, because he can turn his back to a defense and then turn around and deliver the ball where it needs to go, and that's not easy to do, but he can do that. So the goal of the running game is not to, be a 150-yard dagger somebody with a 70-yard touchdown run. The goal of the running game on this team is going to be to get defenses to have to put 8 guys in the box to open up the play action passing game.
You mentioned Bradford. This week, Sports Illustrated's Peter King said that Sam Bradford is the league's MVP so far. And, no doubt, Pete, as you say, he's been important to the Viking offense, but he hasn't put up the gaudy numbers that you normally see a league MVP have. Do you agree with Peter King about Bradford, at least thus far, or do you see someone else around the league who you think has had a bigger impact on a team?
Well, I think if you look at the circumstances of his arrival with the Vikings, then yeah, he's definitely part of that. This is the first time in his career that he started 3-0 as a starter. He never had 2 wins in a row, or started a season with 2 wins as a starter. So each week they add to this tally. It's going to be a new personal best for him. The key, and this is something I tweeted as soon as we signed him, I looked at the number of touchdowns in his career versus number of interceptions. We've had a low-scoring defense, or one of the best scoring defenses in the league for quite some time, for a couple of years now. So that's not new. What's new on defense are the interceptions, the turnovers, being plus 10. And as long as Bradford doesn't come in and throw a bunch of interceptions, and people are wanting to see him, I think, open up on the offense more, but at what cost? You don't want this offense to open up more and then score 1 or 2 more touchdowns a game, but then have 1 or 2 interceptions a game. It's not something you want to do. You want it to be and have him stay where he's not taking the risky throws and forcing things. And he's done that so far. So for him to come in, learn a new offense that quickly, and to be as potent as he's been on offense, I would agree with Peter King's comment on that and say, yeah, he's the MVP. He's saved the season for a team that lost their quarterback, their starting quarterback, a week before the season even started. So it's a pretty amazing story in that respect.
Besides losing the quarterback before the season started, all the worries were about the Minnesota defensive line, especially 2 weeks in, Sharif Floyd goes out. And after 3 weeks, whether it be Shamar or Tom Johnson, they filled in pretty admirably. No real perceived drop-off. And what I'm interested from your perspective, you see guys get injured before. What's his role when Sharif Floyd comes back from his cleanup of his knee? What's his role, or does he take a backseat to the other guys who are performing well?
That'll be very interesting. He's a first-round draft pick, and people seem to forget that. And he does have a lot of talent, a lot of skill. And he's very disruptive in the running game with his ability to get off the football so quickly. He has an amazing get-off. The thing is when he comes back, he'll just be one more very talented defensive lineman we can add to the mix. That's the thing. Linval Joseph is playing more, I think, from a number of snaps standpoint than he has in a long time. So maybe when Sharif comes back, he can pull some snaps off of him. But it'll be a great thing to have him back. And do we need him back? I think we need him back from a body standpoint, from having some depth. But I don't think this defense needs him as a starter. I think the guys that are coming in and playing right now, like you mentioned, a couple of them, Shamar Stephen and Johnson are doing a fantastic job. And what's so neat and what I love to see is just how these coaches put their players in positions to succeed. They ask Linval to do certain things, play a certain technique that only he can do. And then off of that, they have Daniil Hunter at end they let him move around and do different things and run stunts and use his quickness off of the Linval Joseph eating up double teams and having to double team a guy like that. So it's taking all these talented people and packaging it together in a defense where everybody plays to their strength. And I think that's the key. And it's very overlooked. And I think, Andre, the coach, and Zimmer and those guys are just they're amazing in that respect, that they're putting these guys in positions to succeed. They're not asking them to do what they can't do. They're out there doing what they can do, and they're building a scheme and a defense around what the certain talents of each one of these players are, and that's why we're having such success.
Elsewhere in the NFL, one of the things that struck me in the past week is, for every rookie quarterback success we have, like a Russell Wilson, there are another 100 rookie quarterbacks who are thrust into the spotlight in the first season, and they can't handle the speed or the complexity of the game or really have any success at all. But this year, a couple of guys, Cowboys, Dak Prescott, and the Eagles, Carson Wentz, they're lighting it up at least through 4 weeks. And I'm curious, from what you've seen of these guys from afar, what do you think it is that allows them to get this early success in the NFL? And do they have the type of talent that you're seeing that they can sustain it? Or are they more like an RG3 or a Colin Kaepernick who defenses can eventually scheme for them and stop them?
Well, I think Wentz is the kind of guy that is set up for long-term success. And oh, by the way, if there's a defense that has given up less points than the Vikings, it's the Eagles. I think the Eagles are number one. They'll still be number one because they were on a bye. But they haven't given up much in the way of points on defense. So the one thing I think that's getting overlooked with the success of Carson Wentz is the success of the Eagles defense and how well that group and that other side of the ball is playing. So for the young man is not put in positions where he is the guy, where he's not in San Francisco under that offense where so much pressure is put on the quarterback to make things happen. Bradford didn't succeed in that. I mean, he did for a little while, but it didn't work. And now we're seeing what Bradford can do in a different type of system when he has a defense that plays so well. And then so the game doesn't become outscoring your opponent. The game becomes, we got to move the ball, but all we need to do is get it out to midfield and pin him inside the 20, and we'll get the ball back around midfield after the defense goes out and stops them, and then we play in a short field. I mean, that's the game. That's all three phases of the game playing together. And a lot of times, and I've said this before with Adrian Peterson and this offense, this would be a dream for a young quarterback to come in and play, because when teams play you, they don't worry about you. They worry about the running back, and they're doing things to stop the running back. So that should open up things in the passing game. And Bradford, right, is good enough to do that. And I think Wentz is also good enough to do that. So these young guys are succeeding, but I don't think it's a team effort. And because the defenses are playing so well, especially in Philadelphia, these quarterbacks are allowed to succeed. Plus, I think I'm not totally rote on the Philadelphia staff, but I believe they have 3 former NFL quarterbacks on that coaching staff. And all of those guys, the head coach, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback coach, those guys have all played the position. So he has just a ton of help, guys that can mentor him at any time. So that's going to help as well.
Yeah, and I got to imagine, based on what you're saying, a lot of these high draft choice quarterbacks, they get thrust in the spotlight on a bad team. So they don't have that supporting defense. They don't have the other skill positions there. They're kind of asked to carry the team on their own, and it's probably too early for them in a career.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know what quarterback you could put in Cleveland and turn that team around, especially if the defense is playing so poorly. I mean, there's just not. Yeah, it's football is the last of the team games, Tom. It's the last one. You're not gonna. It's not basketball where you need a couple good forwards and a center, or baseball where you can have a decent hitting team but have a killer pitching rotation. I mean, you got to have a solid team throughout, and that's one thing that's really, again, going back to the Vikings and who I see them every week, and Cordero Patterson and those guys Marcus Sherrill's making plays on special teams, recovering. I mean, I during the game I mentioned this. I misspoke, but it is a 99-yard drive. I mean, the Vikings offense started on the 1-yard line. They got out a little ways. They had to punt, and then Cordero Patterson basically causes a Giants fumble or a muff punt. Sherrills recovers it. Offense gets the ball. They go down to score. I mean, that's as good as a 99-yard drive, right? I mean, it's instead of the punt, just look at it as a deep pass, a deep completion. And that is what happens when you have 3 phases of the game, so to speak: offense, defense, and special teams. And this is something Denny Green would always talk about: offense leading into special teams, leading into defense, back into offense, and then you win. So it's a complete team effort right now.
For these 3 phases of the game, there's a fourth that's kind of interesting that most people don't think about. And this week, we had players that were fined and flagged for excessive end zone celebrations, yet the NFL places these commercials out there on Sunday Ticket or the NFL Network, and it shows the players celebrating on the field to get people hyped up to watch the game. And I'm curious, from your experience, is the NFL sending a mixed message to players by promoting those celebration displays in their ads, but then fining players for the things that get fans all hyped up?
Yeah, I mean, there's definite rules on the celebrations, and that's kind of the funny thing. And in players in the heat of the battle, I mean, if you make an unbelievable catch like Adam Thielen did, I believe it was against Tennessee, and you get up and you spike the football, that's a penalty. But if you make that same catch in the end zone and you spike the ball, it's not a penalty. You can celebrate by yourself as much as you want, but if somebody joins you or works with you or does something with you in the end zone, then that's a penalty. Now, if the quarterback turns to his offensive guard and does a celebration after he throws a touchdown pass, that's not a penalty because you're not in the end zone. So there's definite guidelines to how they celebrate. And you look at other sports like hockey, where there's not much in the way of celebrating because of fighting. And you don't want to rub something in somebody's proverbial face because, you're going to get a fist to the face pretty soon afterward. You look at baseball, and if you toss the bat one too many times, well, the next time you get up to the plate, you're going to get a 98-mile-an-hour fastball right at your head. There's a way of keeping people in line. In the NFL, they've completely eliminated any possibility of the opponents contributing to that, like in baseball with the pitcher and in hockey with the goons and things like that. So they have to come in and hit guys in the pocketbook. So again, it's a combination of a bunch of very odd rules, of when and where and how you can celebrate. And then they've also, you go in and you get in a fight in the NFL, you're getting hit in the pocketbook big time. And I mean, we're talking after tax dollars, and they're hitting you hard. So you can't just use the players to keep the other players in line. So the league has inserted themselves and made themselves, judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to celebrations. And yeah, it's interesting that they'll televise the legal ones, but they're not going to televise the illegal ones. But it's very, very hard to know, if you're just a fan watching the game, what type of celebrating is legal and what type is not. It's very, very interesting.
The last time you put a pair of pads on the NFL was really the year 2000, and in that 8-year career that you had, you didn't have a chance to score. It's long enough ago. I mean, what were we going to see in the end zone if you scored a touchdown? Were we talking the old Cabbage Patch dance? I mean, what were we going to see?
No, you know what? My favorite thing probably would have been is something from the Three Stooges.
We got to stall Mrs. Bedford off till we find her dog. Now start thinking, if possible. What's the matter with you?
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
And I used to love it when Curly would take his hat and tap it on his head and then point his finger like a machine gun. You know what I mean? You could do that with a football, but in this day and age, that would have been immediately seen as promoting violence and whatnot. When in reality, it would be a tip of the cap to probably the greatest TV show that was ever put to film, and that would be the Three Stooges.
He was a classic knucklehead. There's no doubt about it. Underrated comedian, wasn't he?
Oh, the Three Stooges were the best ever. I mean, from a comedic standpoint, I've seen, I have, when I was younger in my playing days, I had every episode of Curly on tape. So I had a big box of tapes of all the Three Stooges, and my friends and I would get together and have a few adult beverages. We just throw them in, and it's just the best ever. They're actually more fun when you're an adult, because then you understand all the jokes, especially all the illusions of drinking.
It's true. I don't know if you know it. When he would do that, he'd jump on the ground every once in a while. He'd spin around. I don't know if you know this, but he had forgotten his lines, and so whenever he would forget his lines, he would do that, and that's how he would get away from it, make the scene funny still.
Right. And that was the other thing I thought about too, is that you could lay on the ground, do the planking bit that he did, and then run around in circles on the ground. But on the AstroTurf, don't know if that would have worked.
That's true. Well, listen, that brings us to the end of this week's NFL Soundbites. And I want the fans not to forget to follow Pete and his daily thought on the NFL on Twitter at Pete Bercich. And please join us next week. We've got Hall of Fame wide receiver Chris Carter coming. And before we sound off here, Pete, any quick thoughts that you had from playing with Chris Carter?
Yeah, there's a few things I want to ask him about. I mean, one of the things that he used to say is that Buddy Ryan saved his life. You know, when Buddy Ryan cut him from the Eagles, he said Buddy saved his life, and I think that was a wake-up call for him. So that's always been very interesting. And for Chris, just the match and the pairingness of pairing of confidence and competitiveness. And Chris is one of the more confident players, or arrogant. You call it arrogance, whatever you want to call it, but he was so confident in his abilities. And on the sidelines and get me the ball when you needed a big play. I mean, he was the guy that would be standing there saying, "Throw me the ball." I mean, that kind of confidence is rare. It really, truly is. And as a teammate, you'd love having him on your team, man. I mean, the guy was he was amazing. So those are the kinds of things that the mindsets, his life, his story. Those are the things that I'm most interested in.
Well, we look forward to hearing the conversation next week. So until then, for Pete Bercich, I'm Tom Moore. So long, everyone.